We got a little high school sports to talk about in a strange weather week in Tulsa. It's drizzling, freezing rain, snowing right now. Hopefully, by the time you guys watch this video, it will have warmed up like 30 degrees, and at least that will be on our past. The news continues regardless of the weather, Barry. Even in late April, when you think again you get a bit of a respite from it, that's not necessarily the case. We're going to talk about a familiar coach and a familiar player mostly here on this segment. And let's start with the coach. David Alexander did some big things at Broken Arrow not that long ago. Is going to try to do some big things on another 6A superpower in the Metro. Tell us where he's headed and what the backstory is.
Yes, David Alexander, the former Broken Arrow head coach who led the Tigers to their only state title in football ever back just in 2018, not that long ago. He is headed to Jenks as the Trojans special team coordinator. So that was an interesting move that was announced, or at least we learned about late last week.
Right.
And it was ironic where David Alexander's, when he won the state title in 2018, they beat Jenks in the state championship game.
Yeah.
But David Alexander had obviously, he was at Broken Arrow as the head coach for 7 years. From most people's viewpoint and standards, 7 really successful years, made the playoffs every year. And of course, won the state championship in 2018, but Broken Arrow, after last season, decided wanted to go in a different direction and hire Josh Blankenship. And so at that time, David Alexander said that he would be happy to take, he just wanted to coach. It didn't matter whether as a head coach or as an assistant coach. He said he'd be happy to be somebody's position coach somewhere. And so lo and behold, he's back at Jenks, where he was an assistant for 7 seasons from 2006 through 2012. Jenks won 3 state titles during that time. And at that time, current Jenks head coach Keith Riggs also was on Alan Trimble's staff with David Alexander. So they got to know each other well then. They've had a great relationship. And so it shouldn't be that surprising that David Alexander winds up back at Jenks. And he's very excited about the opportunity.
You know David pretty well, obviously. You've covered him for a number of years. And that was such a high profile episode, right? The whole deal. It's so weird. The whole, the way that thing went down at Broken Arrow, a lot of speculation, obviously put Alexander in a really uncomfortable position. A guy with his track record doesn't usually have to worry about job security. Has he, as far as you know, has he sort of come to peace with that? Or did he maybe maybe we assume it's taken some time for him to come to peace with that, and he actually sort of digested it nearly after the fact and just, pivoted and moved on.
Well, I remember talking with him I think it was just like a day later after the announcement was made that Broken Arrow was going in a different direction. And he seemed at peace back then. I mean, I've never seen a coach in that situation be as at peace, at least outwardly. And so I was really incredibly impressed back then that instead of being bitter at the situation, where it would have really been easy to be bitter, if I was in his shoes, I probably would have been, at least for a little while.
Right.
But, he seemed really at peace even back then. And I think he has said he just likes to coach football, likes to work with kids, and whether it's as a head coach or assistant coach, he just wants to coach football. And he says there's a lot of advantages to being an assistant coach. You can have even better or closer relationship with players as an assistant coach, a position coach,
right,
than you would as a head coach. And he really likes having the opportunity to have those relationships. And as far as being a special teams coach, I asked him, what type of special teams coaching experience do you have? And he said, well, because, back when he was with the Tulsa Towns as the head coach, where he didn't have many coaches, he pretty well had to do the special teams for them, even when he was their head coach. And he said special teams is always an area he's had an interest in.
Yeah.
And he even at Broken Arrow, he was involved in special teams, even though he wasn't the special teams coach there. So it's a big addition for Jenks. I think it's a great addition for Jenks.
No kidding.
David Alexander going back to rejoin the Trojans.
Yeah. Imagine those who expect Jenks to repeat next year. Most of it's going to come down to who's back, right, on the field and the development of some key positions. But when you got a coach of the caliber of David Alexander running your special teams, that can't hurt. So props to Keith Riggs for adding a real name to his staff. More news from the Metro and 6A2 this time, in that Braylin Presley, the outstanding player for Bixby, committee, and announcing we're taping on Tuesday. He let everyone know on social media he would be announcing his college commitment Wednesday. So this will play through the week after Presley's made his call. We can't deliberate about that, but we can sort of talk about the situation. And I thought I'd ask to compare where Braylin is with regard to the whirlwind of his recruitment versus his older brother Brennan at Bixby a couple of years ago before he made the call to Oklahoma State. This seems a little bit more of a spotlight type deal, does it not?
Oh, yes, very much so. Brennan wasn't getting that much attention, which always at this point in his high school career, and that always baffled me at the time because, you could tell Brennan was a special player too. Well, the first 2 times he touched the ball in a varsity game, he scored long touchdowns. So you could tell right from the get-go he was a special player, but colleges really didn't give him much attention until after his junior year. They got, maybe because of Brennan's success, they got in on Braylin a little earlier than that, although not as early as you might expect, considering his level of success he had his first 2 years at Bixby. I think it really took last year until that game against Booker T. Washington on national TV before everyone woke up like, hey, Braylin's a great player too.
Right.
I mean, it's really hard to ignore him after he racked up over 400 yards against the Hornets on national TV. And I think some out of the area colleges made like an offer the next day to him. And then I think that woke some people up more in this area of the country, say, hey, we need to get in on him too. And I think that's when his recruiting really took off. And that leads to his making his commitment this week.
Is he, if you could nitpick, is there anything different about the brothers that you could put your finger on, or are we looking at clones here in terms of style of play?
Yeah, there's some similarities, of course, but there are also some differences too, and on how they are used a little bit at Bixby. Obviously, both outstanding runners, and they both are really good receivers too. So there are some differences. There are some similarities. Brennan was a great defensive back as well. He was really an outstanding defensive back. And so I think Braylin will have great success at the college level. Sure. I think he projects really well, as I do think Brennan does. And hopefully he will get more action at OSU in next season than he did last year. I think the bowl game showed everyone what he could do. Yeah.
With especially a guy like Tylan Wallace, well, and for that matter, Dylan Stoner moving on, the door's open for Brennan, certainly in Stillwater. Don't blame a young guy for wanting to get the commitment out of the way, right? So that he can cruise into the summer before his senior season and enjoy his senior season. Well, obviously he's going to want to add a state championship. Talking about Braylin now at Bixby, I asked you earlier if there was some peace, in the works around David Alexander. I guess you just root for the same kind of at ease to set in with regard to a highly recruited, highly touted player like Braylin, and that there's no drama moving forward.
Yes, and a lot of times you hear from a highly recruited student athlete after they make their commitment how glad they are to have that commitment made and over with. But when you make a commitment, when any student athlete makes a commitment at this time of the year, or even a bit later, I mean, there's a lot that goes on or can go on in the next 8 months before the early signing period begins on December 15th. And it just seems like so many, I would say seemingly half of the commitments that are made at this time of the year or earlier, or perhaps a little bit later, that those commitments change during those 8 months or the time before you can officially sign. So sometimes don't know exactly how meaningful these commitments are when you have so many people flipping their commitments between now and signing day. I mean, we see it all the time. And I mean, these days, even when players sign, that doesn't always mean that they're going to wind up at the college that they signed with. I mean, we've seen some high profile instances of that recently.
Yeah.
So it's all sort of this NCAA transfer portal mentality that even extends down into the commitment period and signing period to an extent these days.
It has complicated the process, hasn't it? Not just that's the thing. The portal, and again, I've made it clear with regard to the stances I've taken in print at the World. I'm all for athletes having the freedom to move about, to better themselves. But there are consequences for the actions, and a lot of times they do trickle all the way down to how coaches manage recruiting periods as they try to figure out numbers, right, in terms of the rosters. So I think that's kind of what you're touching on there.
Right, and I don't fault any student athlete for making commitment and then seeing that they need to change their mind.
Yeah.
But I just think it's important to keep these commitments, to put them in context. That's why every time we write a commitment story, we include it someplace in there. Verbal commitments are not binding.
Right.
The official early signing period is such and such a date. This year it's December 15th.
Yeah.
So when a student athlete makes their commitment at this time of the year, I mean, yes, it's interesting, but sort of don't, take it with a grain of salt, I guess that's the phrase.
Yeah.
That just because the student athlete makes a commitment to university at this time of the year, that doesn't mean in 8 months from now they're going to be signing with that university.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, that's a back of your mind warning there from Barry, who's been through a lot of those, I think, over the years, and it can be interesting. All right, all world awards. You and Mike Brown, I know, busy still handing out, sort of honor roll type things to the athletes in the Metro. You want to put in a plug for that as well before we check out till next week?
Yes, on the day we're taping, Tuesday, April 20th, we started off our All World Week with All World Wrestling. And I will have to say that this was probably maybe the deepest, as far as talent is concerned, of great wrestlers in the Tulsa area that we may have had, at least in many, many years. And so it was really a challenge to just have 5 Wrestler of the Year finalists. I think this is the first time we've had, I think one other year we had 5 finalists, but there's just so many great wrestlers in the Tulsa area. So what a way to kick off our All World Week. And then the next 2 days, we will have boys and girls swimming. Then on Friday and Saturday, we will have boys and girls basketball, and we'll cap the week with the Tulsa World's All-State boys and girls basketball selections. And want to remind everybody that the All World Awards, the 5th All World Awards, will be on June 29th. Details to come. That's
called a tease in the parlance of we're new to broadcast, but we're not new to teasing. So that's what Barry just rolled out for you, a tease. So keep an eye out for more of the awards from Barry and Mike. They're going to keep track of that, the games that continue, the athletes who continue to commit to the schools, and coaches who continue to move about the carousel. It is always coaching movement season. If you're Barry and Mike and trying to follow it all. Good seeing you, my friend. We'll do this again next week.
All right. Sounds good, Garen.